Get ready for the greatest roast of all time, the Roast of Tom Brady, a Netflix live event happening May 5th. Hosted by Kevin Hart, the 7-time world champion gets his cleats held to the fire by famous friends and frenemies on an unforgettable night where everything is fair game. Tune in on May 5th at 5 p.m. Pacific time for the Roast of Tom Brady, live only on Netflix.
With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
Hello, it is your partner, Big Boy, interested in giving back to your community while making new connections in your neighborhood? Introducing Neighbor to Neighbor, a California volunteers network that empowers you to take action, contribute to local needs, and be a part of something bigger than yourself. Visit ca-neighbors.com to learn more about how you can get to know your neighbor and strengthen your community. Neighbor to Neighbor, it takes a neighborhood. Hello.
Hey guys, how you doing? It's Mick Tully for World Martial Arts Television, and full disclosure today, this is probably one of the strangest interviews I'm ever going to do, for the simple reason that it's the first time ever that I'm not going to do the introduction, because as you all know, you follow the show, the weird and wonderful world of martial arts. There's guys who can do it, and then there's guys who are hobbyists, and then there's every now and again the real deal. So the thing is, I'm not going to judge. A clown like me is not going to start doing the intros here. So I'd like to hand you over to my guest today, who's going to introduce himself to you guys, and then we're going to get going. Sorry to put you on the spot, brother, but if there's one guy who's going to do the intro, it has to be you.
All right. So how you doing? My name is Ken Goodman, better known as Shadow. I'm an instructor of 52 blocks. I created my own system called 52 VTK, which is a combination of 52 blocks, Wing, Chun, Kali, and World War II combatives. The system was pretty much born in the prison system, where I unfortunately spent a vast chunk of my life, 24 years, 25 total, because I had to do another year for a mistake I made out here. And so through trial and error, getting into a lot of scraps with corrections officers and with other prisoners, I was refining the system, seeing what works, how I could make it work better. If it didn't work the way I anticipated, if I could make it work, and if not, just kicking it to the side. And we got to what I have today, which is 52 VTK. Originally, the VTK stood for 52 blocks. Ving Sun was the VT, and the K was for Kali. Now it stands for violent tactics and knowledge, right? Because that's what the system has pretty much grown into. It's a collection of violent tactics and the knowledge gained through hard experience on how to employ those tactics in the most efficient and way, and effective way possible.
Well, just as you said this, I did my research, as I always do, because I don't want to go into any sort of interview without knowing a little bit about the person. And as our mutual friend Mahi will tell you, you can always tell how interested I am in the subject by the amount of research that I do. So 9 times out of 10, I dismiss it very quickly. And with yourself, I've tried to devour everything that I could find. Before this interview, I was actually messaging Mahi, and I'm just saying, dude, I've got to check this out. I've got to check this out, because there's a real world pressure testing, and that's real world where a guy's paying his mortgage, they're getting up, they're doing a 9-to-5 job, and then there's a completely different world, and that's the world where you devised and pressure tested this system. So what I want to do is I want to start right at the beginning. I don't want to, I hope you don't mind, I'm not going to ask you any questions about how you ended up getting into prison. What I'd rather know is, did you have any real world experience in fighting before you went in? And did that inform you? or did you just go in as a blank slate and literally have to jump in at the deep end?
So no, I had started training. I began my martial training at 5, right? My first instructor was my mom. She studied fencing in high school, and she taught my sister and I, so we were pretty good with the rapier and the dagger. And my mother, because of her own background, she did some fighting in the street, so she knew how to apply those principles to empty-hand combat, and she taught that to me as well. Then I had uncles and cousins who were constantly inside the prison system, whereas when I first got exposed to 52 blocks was through family members, right? So then I'm learning the box, I'm learning the fencing, I'm learning 52 blocks. From 52 blocks, I got into Wing Chun, and then towards the end of my Wing Chun training is when I ended up in the prison system. So I had already had knowledge, right? And then when you add on to that, I grew up in Brooklyn. This is in the 80s. And Brooklyn was a very rough place in the 80s. Of the 5 boroughs, most people will agree Brooklyn was the roughest. We used to have fights that would last for hours, like in the middle of the street fighting, the car would come. I'd go to one side of the street, you go to the other side of the street, let the car pass. After the cars pass, we get back in the middle of the street and keep going till somebody either quit or somebody gets knocked out. So I started fighting in the streets. When I got into the prison system, because the situation I was in, I didn't think I was ever going to come home. So I had put it in my head that if I have to be here, I'm going to make sure dudes respect the fact that I'm here and I'm not somebody to be played with. So anybody who had a reputation as a good fighter, I either went after them to fight them or I went after them to learn from them, right? So I was always compiling knowledge and information. And some of the older guys who were like some of the pioneers of 52 blocks, because 52 comes out of the prison system. So going into the prison system, I got to now be in the place where the system was born and getting in contact with some of the individuals who had a hand in actually creating the system itself. And because I was a wild kid, they took a liking to me. So they would share information with me, teach me things. The most influential individual being a guy named Minister Ali. I probably learned more about 52 blocks from him than I did from anybody else. So yeah, and then like I said, I stayed with stuff. So I was always fighting in and out the box, in and off Kate Lot. So I got opportunities to pressure test, as you said.
Yeah, but so as you're saying this literally to me, it sounds like something out of a movie. Because you see the parallels. You go to China to learn the system, but you've gone to that birthplace of it. And just so timeline wise, when did 52 blocks, or when did, because I've heard for years, like, I'm a lifelong martial artist. So yeah, I grew up reading magazines and, like Count Dante, dudes like that, so Count Dante, you find out, was a hairdresser. So he wasn't really legit, right? But, guys like, guys from your neck of the woods, like Peter Urban, Moses Powell, guys like this, these were legends to me. And so I can see their timeline there, like out in the free world. But where did this, like the first time I ever heard Jailhouse Rock, I thought I was having my leg pulled because someone says there's a fighting system based in prison. And I was like, no, there wouldn't be. And then I'm thinking, you've got guys locked up for 23 hours a day. Most of these guys aren't going to be diplomatic. If you don't learn how to fight, you better learn quick. So what was the timeline for basically 52 blocks or Jailhouse Rock, or, the original fighting arts in a prison, from your understanding?
Just so that I'm clear on what you mean, are you asking like how did it develop over time in the prison system?
Yes. So from the genesis of it right the way up, if you could share that with me.
So as far as the analogy I like to use is that if you think about 52 blocks as a tree, the roots of that tree will begin in slavery, right? There were records of Mandingo, what they call Mandingo fights, right? Where they would have black slaves from one plantation
yes.
to the other plantations and so on and such. As like you said, you're an experienced martial artist. You know how about trial and error. If you get into a fight somewhere, or you get in a sparring match and you try something that doesn't work, you refine your technique. So it don't even make sense that these guys on the plantation were doing the same, right? So this would be the root where it started at, with those fights right there. Then over time, we get the Emancipation Proclamation, the slaves are freed. Immediately after that, the black codes kick in, Jim Crow kicks in, Reconstruction kicks in. So now black men are being put in prison for vagrancy, not having a job, so on and such. So they're in the prison system. So now some of these guys that are being put in the prison system are the same guys who were fighting on the plantations, right? Some of them became prize fighters. Some didn't have it, they weren't that fortunate, they end up in the prison system. So now you're in an environment where whatever you was doing before, you got to take it up a notch because prison isn't a friendly place, right? There's a lot at stake. How open can I be with my speech here?
Totally open.
All right, cool. So there's
go all the way, brother, just like you would with me.
All right, cool. So there was a culture inside the prison system at one time, right? It's not as prevalent, at least not in New York State as it was before, but the booty bandit culture, right? Which was basically guys are sexual predators, and they would prey on other individuals, for sexual reasons, right? And a lot of the guys who were booty bandits were really good fighters. So now if you're fighting these guys, you got more to lose than just a loss. You got your manhood and all kind of other things to lose. So you have to step your game up to meet that threat, right? Every fighting style is created to address a threat that exists at the time. So at the time, this was the threat. So the first, according to an old timer named Powell, the first prison interpretation that would eventually become 52 blocks was called Staino, right? And Staino was designated by punching people in the collarbones, punching their wrists and whatever to make them want to drop their hands, hitting with the elbows and so on and such, right? Staino eventually morphed into like Comstock Shuffle, Woodburn Shuffle, Wallborough Shuffle, and there would be a different style almost for every prison. Not for every prison, but quite a few prisons had a style named after them, right? Like Comstock Shuffle was named for a dude named Comstock Joe, who had been in Comstock for a very long time, and he would use that way of fighting, a stance in the footwork to beat up on people, right? And it was like that with the other styles too. Eventually, according to Minister Alik, you had a group of individuals who all were on Rikers Island at the same time, HGM, because this is before there was a C-74, and the adolescents used to be housed in HGM as well. And all of these dudes, some of them were boxers, some of them were proficient in different prison fighting styles. And you had one dude in particular, a guy they called Karate Rob, or some people call him Karate Bob, just the same person, who had been allegedly a student of Moses Powell, right? So these guys would come out every day, they would wrap their hands up so they wouldn't bust their knuckles up or whatever the case, and they would fight, right? And they would see what style was better than the next style, and they slowly started taking out the best parts of each one of these styles and putting them all together, right? Jailhouse Rock was also part of this because there's a distinction between Jailhouse and Jailhouse Rock, because the system they eventually came up with, they called Jailhouse, which incorporated four corners, which is also known as four walls, Woodburn Shuffle, Wallborough Shuffle, Staino, Comstock Shuffle, Jailhouse Rock, and a couple other things, and whatever Karate Rob added from what he learned from Moses Powell, right? But his influence is why 52 certain parts of it kind of look like Panantukan, because Moses Powell learned from Professor Visitation. Professor Visitation was a Filipino martial artist, so it would only stand to reason that would be the influence. So Jailhouse was the thing, right? As dudes going out to the street, though, it became 52, right? 52 is a flashier version of Jailhouse, right? So as I had told Mahi, Mahi came up with this distinction himself, if we're going to be honest. Jailhouse was to make sure you didn't get laid out, and 52 was about you getting laid with a girl in the street, because with 52 blocks, the focus was more on humiliating the other guy and showing how fancy you could be while beating up on a dude. Where in prison, it was about brutal efficiency, right? You wanted to be effective and efficient. You wanted to end the fight as quickly as possible, and you did whatever needed to be done to do that.
Yeah, you see, this is the thing. Just as you're saying it, first of all, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So I'm listening to you and I'm going, right. I actually was glad that you wanted to know how real we could be on this, because it's the classic line about jail, which is, learn how to fight or learn to get on your knees, because guess what? That you're going to end up doing a bit of that, right? And a lot of dudes aren't into that. And guys who are into it, it's one of those. If you're into it, you better be in the mood for it too, And I do like Mahi's approach, because it's very similar to most martial arts. Anything that's effective to the untrained eye looks boring. It was like you mentioned Panantukan. If I want to get guys to come and train with me, I just go, as I would say, imagine if Father Christmas did Jason Bourne. That's what you're looking at with me, right? And people go, wow, can you show me this? And I do it, and then I go, but I wouldn't do any of that. I'd just box. Now, this is, you mentioned a few things. You use the term shuffle quite a lot. So is the shuffle a system, or is it a series of footworks, or what is it?
It's footwork, but sorry about that. It's footwork. So you get, all right. So again, remember that the system was made inside prison. A lot of the times your engagements are going to happen in close quarters. The tears aren't so big if you happen to get into the fight outside the cell, or if somebody was coming into your cell trying to hurt you, there's very limited space in the cell. So it's a way of moving your feet. So like, could I do demo? All right. So if this is a cell space, right, I don't have a whole lot of room to move. If I stand right in here, though, if he has a weapon or whatever, then I'm still in harm's way. So I need to be able to maximize this little bit of space. So if I'm shuffling like this, right, and every time I move, I'm controlling his hands, now I'm maximizing that space, because when I step back here, see, I'm distant. I can hit him, but I can also, if he does something, I can parry that, because I'm at the maximum extent of his punch, right? When I come in here, I can get a good body punch in, power shots, because I'm on this angle, but I'm out of the way of this hand, and I'm controlling this hand when I move this way, right? Even if I, like this block is called Skull and Bones, so if I move and I suppress his hand with this block, when I step back out the other way, see, I'm pulling that hand out the way as I throw this hook and come back to this uppercut. The whole time, though, I'm staying in this space. So I'm using the footwork, but that's me shuffling my feet. I'm not really going anywhere. I'm just staying in this space, shuffling my feet, going one way or the other to stay offline, get my head out the middle. Make sense?
Yeah. But it's so fascinating to watch this, because as I'm looking at you, what I see is, I see female triangle footwork from Carly without your feet moving. So angling off to the side, getting away from the power hand, and then the two times that you went in, one looked like the vertical salute crash. I saw, Mahi, one of your interviews recently where you were saying, isn't it amazing how this shape just comes out naturally in nearly every close quarter art? And then when you went here, it's like, I don't want to give them a free plug, but the Kesey guys were doing this, when Batman was still doing Kesey. It's you know what it's like. It's the similarities are all there. So I just like, now, Shadow, if you don't mind me asking, how does this work against multiple opponents? And did you ever have to use it against? Are you putting a body in between you and the main guy, or does it work with a multiple opponent game as well?
Absolutely. So, like, this is just one of the blocks, but all the blocks make shape. Like these blocks, this is called the fan. Then you have this block is the windmill, right? This is patty cake. So if I have multiple, and then I can shell up. Yeah, I can shell up, right? Boom. So my hands are constantly moving. So if a punch is coming from this way, I got to block and block. I'm fanning here, and I'm constantly moving as I'm doing that. So my hands, I'm basically creating a web of defense around. I don't really like to call it defense, though. I think of it more as counter offense, because I tell the people I train that we have two modes. We attack the attacker, we attack the attacker. That's it. Right? So every time I do something, I'm attacking the attack. If I block like this, I'm trying to crush his knuckles on my elbow, right? I block like this, same thing. If I fan like this, then I'm trying to bash the incoming punch on the wrist with my wrist as I move that, right? So I'm always attacking everything that's coming at me. I want to make it, it's not cost effective for him to try to hit me, makes him more hesitant, but this is where the fight is really taking place at, right? And then once I get past, once I've attacked his attack, now I'm going to attack him directly. Right? So,
sorry to interrupt. It's so fascinating because you said something that was very, very important, which a lot of people, especially in today's society, if you talk about martial arts now, people think, and trust me, I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think it's a wonderful martial art. One-on-one in a match fight with nobody to get involved, I think it's a great thing. But if you've got a couple of their friends prepared to kick your head in, then maybe you shouldn't be rolling around the floor. And the mindset that you just said, we had it in the UK in the late 90s, where every guy who was a bouncer or a doorman immediately became an expert in self-defense. And then they started calling it self-protection, because then you're changing the mindset there. And it's like when you were saying about defending, some of the stuff you did there, like I won't lie, it blew my mind, because especially when you went to this position here, I was like, that just looks like the start of a really cool kata in karate. Yeah, which it does, right? And then there was other part where you did the pat a cake and stuff. I'm like, that's a cross parry. I love that. And then my main teacher in the UK, he always says you don't block any strike. It's an accidental or an incidental parry, unless you're Roy Jones Jr. or Prince Nassim Hamed. I'll use him as a good example. Until he got beat that time. That was a real warrior. Yeah. He was great while he was winning. Yeah. And the minute he lost his first fight, he realized it was time to get as big as a couch. I don't know if you've seen him recently, but that guy looks like a couch with a pair of legs now. Oh, Professor, you see the guy. He's huge. He's got his own, we'd say it postcode, but you call it a zip code. That's how big he is. He's got his own zip code now. He's huge. But anyway, as you were saying this, that some of the things that I'd like to get you to expand on, where you said it wasn't cost effective, because again, it's the law of diminishing returns when it comes to fighting. In real fighting, it's like, how much are you prepared to pay to get this? And most people aren't prepared to pay. So can you explain to me, how would you train for the offensive part I can get, but the counter offensive, and I don't want to say defensive, because it's not, because everything you're doing, I'm guessing as you're covering up, that's to cause as much damage to them as possible. How do you train for that? Like in jail?
All right. So in New York State, at one time we had boxing teams, right? So guys like Minister would have us over at the heavy bag. And first, let me say this: there is no 52 blocks without boxing. You have to have a firm boxing base in order to be effective at the system, right? All right, so he would have us at the heavy bag, and we'd be training, and then he might show us a block, and he might do this, and he's telling us, because we're always being watched. As he's talking to us, he's telling us, all right, this block is for this, whatever. So we might throw a 1-2, jab, cross, and then cover up like this. And to the officers looking, all they see is, George Foreman did this, right?
Yeah.
We go to like Floyd Patterson with this block right here, right? So, like I said, there's a block called the Comstock, which is just a stylized Philly shell. So if a person doesn't really study boxing, they think that what they're looking at is just boxing, right? Boom. So then you're learning to do this. And when we would spar, like if you were in the jail where you could spar, right? Like I said, that's if there was a boxing team there, you would get to practice some of this stuff, right? Or even while doing pad work, because most jails, they would be kind of lenient on that, because every jail had a heavy bag. So if somebody had made some pads or they had pads there and you're doing pad work, so he might, call off a combination, and then when you go to do the hit, I do the block. So now I know that to put the block up there, and I'm learning to respond to the incoming attack as well as deliver my own counterattack.
Yeah, well, now that you said that, the first thing I'd like to say is the correlation between that and any real martial art that's always had to be hidden, like that. Yeah, there's always been somebody. Yeah, I'll catch Mahi later, but 9 times out of 10, me and Mahi know that we can always look towards anybody who colonizes to hold us down a little bit. But in the prison system, you've got these guys who don't want you to become effective. Yeah, they don't want you to learn how to do this, and it's been in every single martial art. And there's a real again. There's a real value to it because you have to do it and it's secret. It was like you were saying earlier. I meant to say this. I'm a real sado when it comes to anything to do with fighting or martial arts. And James Figg, who was quite famous in the UK, he was the father of modern boxing. Like, he was the guy behind the Queensberry rules, and he taught the cudgel and the short stick and everything. And one of the guys that he always referenced was Bandingo, who was the black champion. And he came over, and this was back in the days where, you know yourself, it's like throughout history, there's always been 1 or 2 characters that rock up. It's like in Japan, the black samurai, who now everyone knows about, but they didn't know about for years. And it's just like, so how did this come in? Because when you mentioned it, like, this is strictly for me, because I just want to pick your brain on this. When you use the term Bandingo or Bandingo, is that like a generic term that they would use for a person or an area, or what?
Mandingo, yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Hey, Professor, that's how wars normally start, because we say the same word but a little bit differently, and the next thing you know, you're invading me or I'm invading you. Sorry about that.
Man, there's a tribe in Africa that were called Mandingo, the Mandingo tribe. They were warriors, and for whatever reason, when the enslaved people over here,
I'm profoundly deaf in one ear, and you said Mendigo and I said Bendigo, and that's why I but they sound the same. Will, come on, that's our producer there. He's giving us he's giving us real time telemetry, as they say, giving us good information. Carry on, sir.
So any big, strong black dude was just called Mandingo. The assumption was that he came from that tribe. He must have come from that tribe, being a big, strong black guy, right?
Right.
The generic term over here for big, strong black dude. So a big, strong black dude that could fight was a Mandingo.
Oh, no worries. Now, this I didn't know if I should ask this question, but I'm going to have to, right? So in prison, I'm guessing a lot of the inmate versus inmate beef would be either connected to a personal issue, or maybe, like gangs they're a real thing in jail, right? So would gangs have a champion that would meet another champion, or how is there like a hierarchy league to this thing?
That's a yes and no question, right? And what I mean by that is, so certain organizations, there may be a dude in an organization who's more known for putting in work, or I'm trying, what would be, you familiar with that term?
Yes.
All right, cool. So there would be a guy who might be more known for, putting in work than somebody else. Now, the thing is, particularly in New York, that guy will usually work his way up to being the top guy. So now it's other people's turn to put in work. Usually what happens is, if it's a gang on gang thing, right, everybody goes at it, right? Unless, there's a thing we used to do called going gun to gun, right? Yeah, you belong to an organization, I belong to an organization. There was some type of misunderstanding, but it's been determined that everybody doesn't need to go to the box as a result of this. So you guys pick a guy, we pick a guy, and those two guys, you guys give your guy a knife, we give our guy a knife, and they go off somewhere where the officers can't see, and whoever comes out of there alive is the winner. Yeah?
Right. But you see, this is the next part, and you've led this into it. So that the officers don't see. Now, I know this sounds like a movie, but was there ever times where it was just like, you guys are going to go, you're not going to kill each other, but we're going to put a bet on, you know, where there'd be a side bet? Were guys making money at any of this?
You talking about with the officers, or you talking about with the police?
Well, no, from the inmates all the way up to the officers.
Yeah, so as far as like the knife on knife stuff, I don't ever know of anybody betting on that. But so just like we had the going gun to gun, there was another thing called shooting five, basically where you would shoot five, go knuckle up with somebody for 5 minutes, right? And no weapons allowed, or whatever the case. Now those situations guys will bet on, and depending on what jail you was in or what tier you was on in the jail, some officers you could ask like, yo, I want to go 5 minutes with 20 cell, right? And the officer would let you guys out, they search you, boom. And officers he call some of his buddies, and they would be betting to see who would win.
Right. Well, you see that it's I find human nature fascinating anyway. And then the incarceration, especially in America, because they've tried everything. They've tried real punitive 1930s to 1960s hard labor, working out on the roads, the road gang, the whole 9 yards. And then they did 60 to 90, where it's like, we're going to invest in the system, we're going to educate, and then we're going to see whether or not the reoffending rates change. And then depending on who you listen to, they'll turn around and go, well, we spent less money, made more money doing the punitive. And it's, they've always tried to study how it worked. And what I'm getting to is, in today's incarceration system in America, which I'm going to be totally I'm going to be honest with you. I look at it and I can't work out how the rest of the world can't see that this is the biggest scam on the planet just to make money. If it's a case of just getting bad guys off the street, yeah, you need to go into your Congress straight away and get at least 75% of them locked up. Yeah, you understand what I'm saying? But in today's society, especially in jail, is this still a thing? This this fighting system? Are guys still at it today?
Well, all right. So the gang, all right. So at one point, like when I first went in, you didn't have a lot of gangs in the prison system. You had very specific, the Latin guys always clicked up, right? You had the Nation of Gods and Earths, you had the Muslims, and then you had whoever else. Between 1990, let's call it 1993, up to now was when you started getting a whole bunch of other gangs, Bloods, Crips, Disciples, and all that other stuff, right? So as the gang culture became more prolific inside the prison system, fighting became less of a thing, because a lot of the dudes in gangs, cowards, they can't fight, right? So they'll try to jump a guy, right? See, they send 4 or 5 guys at a dude and hope for the best, and kind of expect the best in most situations. And if they knew that you was pretty decent with violence is currency in the prison system, right? The better you are at it, the farther along you get, right? So when people knew that you were really good at violence, you had a lot less to deal with inside the prison system. So, because again, like I said, these guys were cowards. When I first went in, guys like to fight. If I was good with my hands and you with your hands, and we had an opportunity to scrap up, it was cool, right? We want to see who was the better man. That became less of a thing the closer we got to the 2000s and past that point right there.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because in part of my research with getting to speak to you, I just went down a real YouTube hole, and it was so many guys who've been in the system for a long time and then came out. Joe Rogan had one guy in particular, And it was like he said, he goes, they just don't have it now. He goes, because you got to remember, it takes a little bit of different moxie to go one-on-one against someone, where now it's like, no, it's going to be 5-on-1. And it was like he said, it was like, there used to be like almost an honor thing. So as much as it is to stop you getting jumped in the shower or just being punked out, some of it was just like, no, let's see who the better man is. Let's, we've got a beef. Let's do it. And I know it sounds weird. It makes me sound like I've watched far too many movies, but that old school trial of combat, Kingdom of Heaven shit, where you turn around, we'll have a fight and we'll see, let God sort it out. If God wanted me to win, I won. And it's just completely changed. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack from this, because now Mahi's a dear friend. This makes me sound too showbiz. So Ken, don't judge me on this, brother, right? But Mahi is a friend of the show. And, when you hear people say that, it makes you sound really poncy, right? But Mahi is a friend of the show, and he's always steered me in the right direction when it comes to good people. And he was explaining to me about how you're trying to bring this out and expose it for what it is, which is an art form. Yeah, it might be a very contemporary art form in regard to, if we say, karate, but realistically, it's as old as Brazilian jiu-jitsu. If we can trace the lineage orally for at least 100 years, we're looking at the same as Brazil, right? So going forward, you as a teacher, you're prepared to bring this art out now and teach people, right?
Absolutely.
So can you explain for some of the guys who'd be interested? Because I'll tell you right now, right? I've been doing martial arts for 40 years. And if it was a case of learning how to just put the knuckle on someone, I learned that really quickly. The fascinating part for me is the cultural appreciation. I'm an Irish construction worker, so I shouldn't be interested in Filipino martial arts. And again, I have to tag Mahi in for a second here. I thought I was doing a Filipino martial arts, and now I find out that I might not have been doing Filipino martial arts with Spanish influence after all, Mahi. I might have to rethink everything, right? But I'm just throwing that in there, right? But syllabus-wise, training-wise, and then reaching out to you, can you cover those? I know there's quite a lot of thrown at you there.
All right. So as far as the syllabus, I put together the syllabus in a way. All right. So again, my thing with this is I want to teach regular civilians how to think like predators. 52 is unique in that, as far as I'm aware, it's the only system that was created by predators to fight other predators, right? So there's a mindset that goes with that, right? And I want people to understand that mindset, because if you really want to hunt the wolf, you got to study the wolf, right? You can't really counteract the poison if you don't know, like you can't come up with the vaccine for the poison if you've never studied the poison itself. So this is what made individuals the apex predators inside the prison system, right? So when you understand how the apex predator thinks and you get approached by somebody on the street, you have a good idea of their mindset, their rationale, the strategy and tactics they would employ, why they would employ them. So the syllabus is set up in such a way to help people understand that mindset, and then a building block thing where we start out with what I call the 4 rooms, which are essentially the 4 mother blocks of the system, and build out from there, right? And then so the system is a 3-tiered system. Each tier is divided into 3 modules, right? And for every tier, there are 3 object classes, what I call objects of opportunity, which are basically, it trains your mind to look at your environment in the way that you start to see weapons everywhere, right? See, one of the things that gives criminals an advantage over other people is ingenuity, right? I was just talking to somebody yesterday, and I was like, I was sitting myself, I made a tomahawk in prison, right? But yeah, right? You take a huge, they have in mess hall, they had these huge cans of tuna fish, and you take the lid off, and you fold it so that the one end is like this, the other 2 ends folded, so now this is at a point. punch a hole through that. You get a toilet brush, which already has a hole in the top, and you take some dental floss, thread that together, and weave that around, and boom, you got a nice solid tomahawk there, right? Most people wouldn't think that way. So I want people to understand that the world is an armory. It's all about how you look at the world around you, right? So that's part of the syllabus. And then, like I said, we start with the 4 rooms. We build up with the empty hand applications, and then we start incorporating objects of opportunity at every level for every module in every tier. So that by the time at the final tier, right, spitting razors, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but that was a thing in the prison system in New York State, right? Guys would carry razors in their mouths and spit them out mid-fight and, do some damage to the other guy, right? And that was always big with 52 block culture. That's why a lot of the blocks, your hands are moving past your mouth, so that in the course you fight, you can spit the razor out and hit the guy, right? So you hit the guy on the neck, you hit him across the eyes and blind him or whatever the case, go across the top of his forehead, let the blood start running down like this. So that's the last object of opportunity in the final tier, right? But we go through other things beyond that. Like, for example, in tier 2, because the tiers start at tier 3. In tier 3, you work your way up to tier 1. In tier 2, one of the objects in the object class is stabbing / pointed objects, right? This knife right here, you can see that, right?
Yeah.
This knife, based on the blade profile I used to like to make when I was inside the prison system, right? So I tell people, this is the knife I wish I had when I was locked up, but I'm happy I didn't, because I probably would have never came home, right? Yeah. But this is made to go with 52 blocks, right? The way the blocks are set up, so I can block, boom, get the knife out there, boom. Now the knife is tucked, it's hidden again. If I happen to be talking to somebody, I can tuck the knife like this, they don't see it, then I can bring the knife out and do whatever. So all of these things like this are incorporated into the system. So it's mindset, because I'm a firm believer that the soft skills are the mortar that hold the brick of the hard skills together, right? You can have all the hard skills in the world, but if you don't understand the why and the how of it, it doesn't mean anything.
So carry on, please, sir.
So the system is set up that you get all of that. You get the physical stuff, you get the hard skills, you get those bricks, but you also get the mortar to line those bricks up and hold them together tight so that everything forms. I'm huge on making sure that people can really protect themselves when the situation is right. If they study with me, I'm not responsible for whatever you do with anybody else, but if you train with me, by the time I'm done with you, you're going to be a different type of animal.
Well, you see, this is the thing, right? You immediately came out of the blocks and said one thing that I'm having a little bit of an online argument at the moment with a couple of guys, original JKD guys, right? Because I'm trying to explain to them that the world's moved on since 1973, and you said something, but you as you did it, I was like going, oh man, time to have a bit of reflection here, Mick, because I'm mugging these guys off, saying I roll every week with guys who are fighting in Bellator. A couple of guys have gone for the UFC, and I'm like, I could go up against anyone. If I can go up against a trained guy, you're training to go up against drunks and guys that might want to try and carjack you. But what you said, I've never heard before, and like it's not often I get this in martial arts, because even if you look at Krav Maga. So Krav Maga is military specific, but against who? And in jail, it's like, this will work. Who did it work against? Bob the Killer. You know yourself. It's like the minute that you meet anyone who's got a prefix or a suffix to their name, they're going to be a bad man. It's like, Houston Bob, or I don't know, Jerry the Killer. As soon as you know that they've got something on the front or the back of their name, that's it. But it's like, I'm having to process this. I won't lie to you. I'm having to process this because it's like, I've never looked at martial arts and gone, right, okay, this is going up against legitimate bad people. Because even if we said it was military versus military, and I don't want to use the term bad person. Yeah. You understand where I'm coming from here, because there's a lot of people who are in jail who aren't bad people. They're victims of circumstance. But you're going on. You could quite rightly go up against a guy who's killed 15 people in cold blood and didn't, like, his heart rate never went over 80. And then it's like, this shit better work. You know, it's like, it's freaked me out a little bit. And the mindset, if you don't mind me, I really want to delve onto this for a second. So you mentioned mindset, and you also mentioned the physical thing, right? Now, I'm guessing that there has to be some sort of, I don't want to sound like Bruce Lee here, but there has to be some sort of emotional connection that has to be addressed, because the sort of stuff you're talking about doing to another human, you have to go beyond that rational thought. That's one of the reasons why I love NLP. That bit where you go, I've got to get past that. What's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, what's black, what's white. And how do you address that in your training?
Right. So there's a quote from Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who was the leader of Haiti, along with Toussaint, when they kicked out the French, right? And the quote goes, "You must become like your natural enemy, cruel and merciless." That quote is the spirit. It defines the spirit of BTK, right? And I tell people that the natural enemy of the law-abiding citizen is the hardened criminal, right? So if you want to treat that person, you have to be just as cruel and merciless as that person, because he did not approach you with the intent on making your day better by taking whatever you had, right? So I tell them that before and after the engagement is the only two times that there's room for mercy, for honor, and all that other good stuff that people like to talk about, right? Before the engagement, you're trying to be merciful by de-escalating the situation, right? After the engagement, you're showing mercy by making the 911 call, letting you know there's been a self-protection incident and somebody needs medical attention. But in the moment, there's no room for any of that, right? So what you have to consider is that when this person approached you, they weren't trying to hurt you, right? Because if you and I were in front of each other right now and I hit you over the head and you went into a coma, you're not feeling anything. But everybody who cares about you is now hurt as a result of what I did to you, right? If you happen to pass away as a result of that injury, you got no more worries, right? You're not here anymore. But everybody who loves you is living with that pain. So I didn't hurt you. I hurt them, right? And if you want to stop this guy on the street from hurting those people, you can't have any mercy for this person. You got to be cruel with this person. You got to put them down the way they intended to put you down. Otherwise, you're giving them the power to hurt your family, right? Now, I've found that people tend to fight harder for other people than they do for themselves, right? You have women who a guy will put a knife to them and do bad things to them, and the woman will close her eyes and deal with it, just like, I just want to get this over with. But that same woman, if a guy would have put a knife to her child, will turn into a demon from the hell and do whatever is necessary to protect her child. See, she fought harder for the kid than she did for herself, right? Fathers, the same thing. Men, we'll tolerate a lot of stuff. People will do things to us and we're just like, all right, whatever. But if they do that or make an attempt to do those things to our children, we'll remove their heads from their shoulders, right? Fight harder or even for our wives, right? We will move heaven and earth to protect our wives and won't do the same for ourselves, right? So that's what I do. I want to put that in people's heads. You're not fighting to protect you. You're fighting to keep this person from hurting the people you care about. You have to protect them by making sure this person doesn't do anything to you. He can only hurt them by hurting you. So you got to put him down.
This is crazy you say this, because when I used to teach, I didn't do self-defense classes for women. What I used to do is I used to do some work with a local charity in my hometown with women who'd been, it was quite, I'll quickly tell you. So they rang me and they said, you come down, we'll hit some pads and externalize the rage. And you can guess, right? So, Shadow, it was some chick with blue hair who'd never been in a real fight. And she was there running the show. And she's like, these ladies want to get rage out. And I said, no, they've seen enough violence. to deal with that. And yeah, they were saying, well, teach them how to. And I was like, teach them how to do what? Fight a guy who outweighs them by like 45 pounds? Not going to happen. They have to sleep with that guy tonight as well, which they've probably done for the last 15 years. And they were like, what way will you come? And I did exactly the same as you. What I used to do was I say, it's easy to fight. You can't fight. Really? You're telling me you can't fight? Guess what? I'll find out what you love and I'll threaten to take it away from you. Some people, it's as silly as their car. Other people, it's their children. And you said something else which blew my mind there, man. When you said before the de-escalation, that shows there's some empathy there. There's some understanding, right? Afterwards, making the 911 call. But in the moment, like, man, that's the most zen thing that I've heard forever. Because it's like, there is no before, there is no after, there is right now. And that's all there is. Like, as you were saying that, I was giggling to myself. So when you were saying something, when the guys are watching this, I hope people don't look at it and think that I'm laughing to myself when you're saying, because that's profound stuff you were saying. But you said two things when you were saying about don't be looking for sympathy, right? When I do jiu-jitsu, I say three separate things to guys when I'm rolling. And it's because I'm a 55-year-old guy who thinks he's still a badass. Shadow. That's all it is. It's all an act, right? So the first one is I always say, are you looking for sympathy? You got to look between spit and syphilis in the dictionary because you're not going to get it from me, right? So that's the first one. You don't get that. And then the second one is you're a monster. And I would say, no, without my cookies, I'm just a monster. That's the other one, right? And then my last one is I jump on them, go knee on belly and go full Alonzo from Training Day, shouting, King Kong ain't got shit on me. And people can't believe when I do that. I go, why? And I said, believe it or not, those three things that I do, that mindset that you say you have to get into, all three of those trigger me. And they get me to that bit where they go, and everyone's like, but you're horrible. And I was like, I spend a good 23 hours of my day not being horrible because horrible works in the world, right? That's if you want something done, and done quickly. Yeah, that's why we know more military than we know diplomats. So, Shadow, you're teaching in-person classes? You're doing online content as well, are you?
Yeah.
So, can you explain, where guys, connect with you?
Online privates. So I do online, like one-on-one privates with people. I do in-person privates. I do seminars, and we're about to start a subscription service as well.
Well, it's awesome. Like, if there's any sort of plugs that you like to do before we wrap up, because I want to bookend this almost like an infomercial, because you're going to be doing some work with our mutual friend Mahi. And what are you going to be doing at the symposium? Because there's some big names at this, and this time it's rather interesting because we've been along for the ride with Mahi on this. So he's gone, and I know he's listening in on this and he'll like this because he first approached it and it was almost like a historian sort of an approach, and it's evolving more and more into I'm prepared to look at anything, which one of the things that I love about Mahi, because he'll look at it and if he thinks he's wrong, he'll admit he's wrong, and if he's right, he will admit he's right. He'll tell you he's right. But this symposium that's coming up, it's the 6th one, and it's more of a street-based look at combat and, dare I say it, the urban jungle.
I'll be covering the way the prison combat systems, pretty much, right? How we would use our empty hands, how we would use improvised weapons, how we would use actual weapons. Like I said, this is use of this is called the Minster, named after, I mentioned him earlier, Minister Ali, right? This is the Minster. This is available on Delta 12 too for anybody interested. Or actually, you can go to 52btk.com and find this knife, right? And I will show how different weapons plug into the system. So there's a thing I like to call universality, right? Where the principles of the system don't change, the method of the system doesn't change.
You see, the universality thing is the one that's got me, because everything that I've seen where you're doing anything physical, it literally, it looks like to me it could be Kali, it could be Silat, it could be karate, and yeah, and it's, I know it's the old Bruce Lee thing where a punch is a punch and a kick is a kick, and do you like? And if you don't mind me asking now, just from a personal standpoint, because I don't get this very often, and I'm not trying to butter you up in any way, right? I've had a couple of real fights for real. I've gone up against guys who are trained guys in Muay Thai, full-time contact karate, and BJJ, but I've never actually had to fight someone like I have to sort of try and lighten it a little bit. Like the Princess Bride, Inigo Montoya. I've never had to fight anyone when death is on the line. Never argue with a Sicilian, get into a land war, or fight with someone with death on the line. But with you, as I'm asking you this, I feel like a bit of a fraud because you've been there, right? For real. Do you see the commonality? Is everything the same, just the volume turned up when it comes to combat?
For the most part, yeah. I think the thing that separates different combat systems is intent, right? That's the whole thing. If I'm going into a sporting event, my intent isn't to kill the other guy, even though during the pre-fight, I might say I'm going to kill that guy in the ring or whatever the case, but we both know I'm not trying to kill him. I just want to beat him and go home at the end of the day. He goes home at the end of the day, right? And there are other differences too. But overall, this intent, when you get into all right, so there are now more because, you have myself, you got my brother Light Burley, you got the brothers for 52 Constellation, you got a couple of other brothers out there. Everybody, we're all doing 52. We just have different interpretations. This is the first time in history that I'm aware of you have individuals with actual curriculum, sit down and roll out curriculums for 52 blocks, right? So, but we may not do it the same. And like one of the distinctions I made was like with me and Light, it's where we learn. I refined my system in the prison, right? And he was learning his out here. So there's a certain level of urgency in the prison system associated with combat because every engagement is a potential life and death engagement, right? The assumption is that this person is trying to take my life immediately, not that, I'm going to beat him up and get black his eye and send him back to the cell. No, if he came into my cell, he came into my cell to do something bad. Either he came in there to kill me or he came in there to try to take my butt, right? So neither one of those are okay with me. So somebody got to die here, right? I got to set the example for everybody else who might get that idea in their head, right? So this was every engagement. So there's a certain level of urgency associated with the way 52 was applied in the prison system. And that right there is one of the things I feel sets it apart from other systems, right? Because, you can say Muay Thai, and if I'm a Thai boxer and I'm competing, I know who I'm going to fight. I know what their weight is. I have some idea of their experience. I've got an opportunity to watch some of their old fights and get an idea of what they do and what they don't do. I don't get any of that in prison, right? I'm seeing this dude for the first time. All I know about him is where I may have heard about him. His weight is not a factor. There's no referee to stop him from killing me. There's none of that, right? So, like I said, in that space in between, there's no mercy. There's got to be cruel and merciless in that space because if he came into his cell or he approached me in that shower or wherever he approached me at, my immediate assumption that his intention was to be cruel and merciless toward me. So I'm going to give it to him the way he was intended to give it to me. That's what I think.
Well, you see, this is the thing, right? As I'm listening to this, I understand the gravity of it all while you're in jail, right? Now you're out. How does it inform your life now? Because by speaking to you, and this is the thing, I'm not getting any vibe whatsoever that you're doing this to make money. I'm getting the vibe that you're doing this because you know that there's a real value to this, to make people live a good, and you know, I know this sounds cliched when I say this, but it's the truth. The amount of people that go through life scared, and they shouldn't. And that's like the thing is, that's the message I'm getting more from you, to be able to go out there and handle these predators that are walking around. Is that what you're looking to give to people?
Absolutely. I want to give them the confidence to be able to do it, but that confidence has to be associated with a practical skill set that would allow them to do it, right? So I don't want to sell anybody any dreams. I want them to know, yeah, you can trust in what I'm showing you, right? I teach what I know works because it worked for me. We can sit here and have this discussion now because I got, unfortunately, plenty of practice using this stuff over years inside the prison system. So I teach what I know works, right? And then I look at each individual I teach, their body type. Maybe this guy may be a little bit shorter, this guy may be a little bit taller. And like, this is how we're going to tweak this to make it work best for you. That it changes the dynamic in things, man, right? Again, everything is mindset, but mindset has to be attached to confidence. If you tell yourself that you're the ultimate badass, but you know realistically that you can't throw a punch properly, there's no real confidence associated with that mindset.
Exactly that. Well, do you know what? It's been absolute joy chatting to you this evening. Also, I'll give the shout out now for bikers, badasses, and brawlers. I hope I've got that in the right order. Check out Mahi. I haven't. Bikers, brawlers, and badasses. Is that right? I'm going to blame this on my CTE from getting punched in the head. That's why I didn't get it right. So I look forward to seeing all of that. It's been an absolute joy speaking to you. And I truly mean this. I never thought that I'd meet someone from Brooklyn cooler than Spike Lee. But guess what? I think I have, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Hey, it's good talking.
I appreciate you.
No, take care, brother.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello, it is your partner, Big Boy, interested in giving back to your community while making new connections in your neighborhood. Introducing Neighbor to Neighbor, a California volunteers network that empowers you to take action, contribute to local needs, and be a part of something bigger than yourself. Visit ca-neighbors.com to learn more about how you can get to know your neighbor and strengthen your community. Neighbor to Neighbor, it takes a neighborhood. Hello.